Today's scripture reading brings us to 2 Samuel chapter 18. At this point in time, everything has been set up. The stage is set to where there's the big battle royale between father and son getting ready to take place. David versus Absalom. And I have this chapter broken down into three sections. And the first is verses 1 through 8, and that is titled, David's Army Goes Forth to Fight Absalom. David gathers his people together, and he sets out three different portions of the army. He divides them into three different sections and sets Joab over one, and Abishai over the other, and Attai over the third part in order to face Absalom's army. It's not a lot talked about concerning the battle itself. It seemed to be pretty one-sided. However, we do see that throughout the entirety of the battle, in verse number 8, the battle was there scattered over the face of all the country, and the wood devoured more people that day than the sword devoured. And so there was a lot of issues going on with the terrain that they were having a lot of problems with. It doesn't specify one side or the other, but just in general. Now, one thing that we see here in this first few verses is that David tells his generals in verse number 5 to, take it easy, right? He says, and the king commanded Joab and Abishai and Attai, saying, deal gently for my sake with the young man. They want them to take it easy on Absalom. And when you're in war, it's not the best strategy, and it's a very difficult strategy to have, and it's very difficult to have that mindset and still win. Okay, let me give you at least one example, and that would be back during the war between the states. Two different mindsets when it came to war. The South, when they invaded the North and they went up through Pennsylvania before their battle at Gettysburg, Robert E. Lee's army marched through the streets and did not plunder, did not pillage, did not steal, treated the enemy territory with respect, because they viewed it a completely different way than Sherman and the Northern Army did in their march in burning Atlanta, and everything, left this wake of destruction in their path. And of course, we know how that war ended up there. But, that's what David desired. David cared for his son. He loved his son. We're going to see that here in just a little bit. Verses 9 through 18, I have that titled, Absalom is caught and killed by Joab. So as the story goes, you see there in verse number 9, Absalom rode upon a mule, and the mule went under the thick boughs of a great oak, and his head caught hold of the oak, and he was taken up between the heaven and the earth, and the mule that was under him went away. So he literally got caught by his hair, and the mule kept on going, and Absalom didn't. That's an inglorious way for one's life to end, but that's ultimately how it did. And one thing that I recalled was, as we were looking through this, if you go back, and I'm not sure what chapter it was in, I'm just not sure, you just have to look back. One of the things that brought so much notice and so much pride unto Absalom was his hair. Talked about how his hair, when they had shore it once a year, that it weighed 5 shekels of whatever. This was a great source of pride and notice unto Absalom. But you see, that's the way it kind of does. What seems to be one's glory can ultimately lead to one's destruction. There's many people today, they look at those people that are rich and they envy that. And they look at those people that are famous and they envy that. But for many people that are rich, it's that very thing that will lead them unto hell, because they trust not in the Lord, but they trust in their riches. And then the same thing for those that are famous. Those that are famous, they care not for the things of God, for they have the adoration of man. Why do they need God? So the thing that seems to be glory unto man can lead to their destruction. This is what happened in Absalom's case. So he's caught by his hair. He's swinging from a tree, which is a curse unto Israel. A young man sees him and he goes and tells Joab. And Joab's like, man, I'd have given you 10 shekels if you just killed him. And he says, so you give me 1,000, I ain't going to kill him, because I heard what David said unto you all. And Joab goes unto him. And Joab, it says there in verse number 14, he takes 3 darts in his hand and he thrusts them through the heart of Absalom while he was yet alive in the midst of the oak. Can you imagine Joab? Now listen, Joab had to be pretty ticked off at old Absalom, because it was Joab that went to bat for Absalom. Remember when Absalom had killed his older brother and had fled, Joab was the one that went to David and say, hey, he's the one that set up this whole conspiracy with the woman that came down and put this big show on in order to convince David to bring Absalom back into the kingdom. And so here it is. Joab plays such an integral part in Absalom being returned unto Jerusalem. And now Absalom has led a revolt against David. Joab had to be mad. He had to be mad. And he didn't care what David said. He killed Absalom. And right, wrong, or indifferent, you shouldn't go against what the king says. But then again, it's war. But anyway, I can understand how Joab would have been quite upset with Absalom at this point in time. And then lastly here, verses 19 through 33, I had this title, David Receives News of Absalom's Death. The majority of this chapter is dealing with Zadok's son that wants to deliver the news unto David. He's like, I picture this young guy in my mind that wants so bad to bear these news unto David. He wants to be the one to run, and he wants to go tell the king, hey, the battle's been won. The problem is David really didn't care about the battle. He cared about his son. So the news that he was wanting to bring didn't really matter to David. Joab, in his wisdom in this moment, saw that this is not the news that David needs to hear right now. We're going to let Cushai take the point on this. He's got a little more tact, a little more wisdom. We're going to let him go and tell the king. And then finally, Hamas is badgering Joab, and Joab's, all right, go and tell him. And he takes the quick route and gets to David first. David, he just dismisses him. He just dismisses him there in verse number 30 there. Turn aside, stand here, and he turned aside and stood still. He did not care about the battle. He cared about his son. He knew, David knew, that God's promises were not going to be usurped by Absalom. He knew that the battle was the Lord's. Victory would be had if it was God's will. So he wasn't concerned about that at all. He was concerned about his son because he had no promise concerning him that he could fall back to. He was concerned about his son. So he set him aside. Cushai comes and he breaks the news in a very tactful way into David. And then we see David's heart breaking in verse number 33. Just you read it and picture that in your mind. And the king was much moved and went up to the chamber over the gate and wept. And as he wept, thus he said, oh, my son Absalom, my son Absalom, would God I had died for thee. Oh, Absalom, my son, my son. And he keeps repeating that, my son, my son. Listen, I have a son, and I know the love that I have for my son, and David loves his son. And again, David had every reason to hate Absalom, but David again has the heart of God within him, and that is the heart of forgiveness. That is the heart of mercy. That is the heart of unconditional love, that heart of grace. And David loved his son regardless of how much his son loved him. You think Absalom did him dirty. on multiple occasions. But yet David loved his son. All right, so that's 2 Samuel chapter 18. And I hope this has been a help to you. The battle's been won. The The coup has been defeated. David's still got business to take care of when he gets back to Jerusalem. And that's what we'll look at here in the coming days. So, Lord willing, we'll see you then.